The Sabres Scoop, hosted by Brandon, Jordan, and Tom, talking everything Sabres.
Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, follow and share on Facebook, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. And on our Twitter feed, you can find us at Sabres Scoop THW and everything else at The Hockey Writer. We are joined today by Stephen Ellis of The Hockey News, host of The Hockey News Now, KHL Report, and Prospect Podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Stephen Ellis THN. Hello, Stephen. Never a better episode to join a Sabres podcast, eh?
Yeah, it's after a loss, always a good time, I guess.
There was also a coach firing just yesterday.
Oh, yeah, very much, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get it. We'll jump right into that then. The Sabres, they just lost 4-1. That's 13 losses in a row, but they had someone else behind the bench tonight, Don Granato. Ralph Kruger, fired. He's out. What are your guys' takes on this? Was this the right move? Did they wait too long? I'll start with you, Stephen.
You know what? Going into his hiring, I really liked it. I thought this was someone who was going to bring. It felt kind of like a fresh look because he was, even though he was obviously an NHL coach before, he was coming from soccer in this case. So let's see if he could kind of how his outlook would change things. And it obviously did not work. At the same time, they never gave him a proper number one goalie to work with. The defense was always an issue, and it was Jack Eichel and company, and not Jack Eichel and really good players around him at all times. So to his credit, they definitely didn't give him a lot to work with. That being said, this year was pretty miserable. You thought with the talent they'd have, especially adding Eric Stahl and Taylor Hall into the fray, they would do so much better than that. So this was kind of indicative. It's like, okay, yeah, they needed to make the change. So it was definitely the right call. Obviously, we're still trying to wait to see who the long-term coach is going to be, but they needed to make a change. I don't know if it would have made a huge difference. It was 5 games ago or now, but at the same time, to keep in mind, they may have also been looking for a coach they could have brought in quarantine type thing because of everything going on. And it's a little tougher to get a new coach this season. So they need to make the change. They did. I'm just disappointed at the end of the way it did because I thought he would do a much better job than he did.
Mm-hmm. You guys have anything else to add, Brandon?
Yeah, no, I would agree with a lot of things that Steven said, and to answer your question, Tom, I do think it was long overdue. And that's not a knock against Ralph. Obviously the 12-game losing streak accentuated things a little bit, brought out a lot of the negativity, and a lot of people didn't like his press conferences. And the last one, as we know, was really odd. His last press conference as head coach, just some of the things he said. But by all accounts, he's a good guy, and like Steven said, he just didn't have the roster to produce, a good result. And what baffled me was he was a Botterill hire who Kevin Adams took a very long time to fire, and it showed sort of a disconnect there. But I think it was the right move, 100%. Let's see if Don Granato can sort of fire up the bench here. It didn't happen necessarily tonight, but I'm interested to see, Jordan, if there's anything else you want to add.
I'm really just excited for the fresh look here, especially with Matt Ellis and Dan Girardi being added as assistant coaches to this team. It was really overdue, to have Ralph Kruger still as head coach after this 12-game losing streak. And I agree with everything that you guys have said so far.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on the Ranting Ron show last night, and we discussed this. We had a pretty lengthy conversation about this and just candidates and who's going to come in. And I think whoever they bring in next, they can't mess up this hire. If it's Bruce Boudreau, whoever it is, if you're going to hire another coach and the same thing's going to happen, the amount of coaches and general managers the Sabres just go through every year, you have to stop at some point. You don't see teams going into the playoffs consecutively who are switching their head coaches and their GMs every other year. They're going to have to think long and hard about this. And I know some people, even me, was considering, like this losing streak's going on a long time. Are they quarantining a head coach? Is there someone who's going to step in? And obviously that's not the case. Kevin Adams has said the search is effective immediately for a new head coach. So I mean, this season's kind of down the drain, I would say. So yeah, I mean, they can't rush this. They have to make sure they're 100% certain the new person they're going to bring is going to get this team to the playoffs, because it would be a disaster if this happens again.
Yeah, 100%. And, the fans are going to want something to cheer next season when hopefully all returns to normal, or at least some semblance of normal. Tonight, though, the losing streak, of course, as the game winds down, extends to 13 games. It was the first game at KeyBank Center in Buffalo here, where there were people in attendance this season. There were over 700 frontline workers tonight, and they did not get a very good show. But then again, it's just, I mean, it's something to be happy about, at least going out to a hockey game. Steven, I'm curious, what was the last hockey game that you went to? It's over a year and a half for me now.
Oh, last game was actually the last one that I covered, the last Leafs game that they played against Tampa Bay. And I remember complaining that it's like the media center we couldn't use that. And our media workroom thing was like not a closet, but it was kind of like the extra space that the Raptors keep their stuff in. And it was just so weird, but we were allowed to be near everybody. And a bunch of us were talking about going to get a drink after the game. And I ended up getting a drink with someone else instead. And it's thinking oh, okay, well, I'll be at the next game 2 days later, and everything shut down. It's weird because it's like I would used to, if we weren't counting just the Leaf games, I'd go to another 3 to 4 junior games in a week, a couple minor midget games. Sometimes I'm going to 7-8 games in a week, and to have not done so for over a year now, it kind of sucks. March 10th.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the search for a new head coach now is effective immediately, according to Kevin Adams, as uttered by Tom just before. I'm curious, guys. So John Vogel of The Athletic wrote an article yesterday, and the 3 options that are available today for Buffalo are Claude Julien, Bruce Boudreau, and Gerard Gallant. I'm curious, out of those names, who should it be? Let's start with Steven.
I don't think Scotty Bowman in his prime could save this team right now. There's other problems with it. Again, you look at, I don't like to blame the owners on the team, but you look at the success that this team has had, and you can count it on a pinky finger over the past decade. And that's a problem. It doesn't really seem to matter who they bring in as GM or a coach. It seems to just not work out. But if I had to pick up those options, I like Gallant. I thought he was a coach that kind of just, everywhere he's gone, he's been kind of screwed in some way, screwed over. And I think that, he does bring a lot of lifeblood to teams where they didn't have that, that spark. So I do like him. Maybe I go, I'm always a proponent of find someone new. Let's stop recycling the same few options, bring in a new voice. But the issue is specifically the Sabres, just because of how rough the past decade is. You need someone who you can trust and who's got the experience. And again, I still think there needs to be changes elsewhere in the organization to really change it. I don't think another new coach is going to fix things, because we thought that was going to happen multiple times in the last decade. But I do like Gallant as the number one option right now, if I had to pick.
And you mentioned bringing in someone who's experienced. Another name that's out there who's not experienced is Nate Lehman for Providence. He had coached the World Juniors USA team to gold. In my opinion, a lot of people are high on this guy. I think the Sabres need someone experienced here. I'm leaning towards someone like Bruce Boudreau, who's proven track record. He's 10 out of 13 seasons he's coached. His team's gone to the playoffs. You need someone like that. Again, you can't take risks with your next hire here. I think it was already very risky. They called in Kevin Adams to be the general manager of this team with absolutely no managerial experience. So if you're going to go with that risk, I wouldn't try pulling another risk, especially on the coaching side, especially after what we've seen has gone down this season. What's your take on it, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, it's surely interesting. I do hope they go for an experienced guy. And if it does wait till the end of this season, another name that could be out there is actually John Tortorella. If he is, Columbus doesn't want him anymore. So that would be interesting. We know he can bring out the best in a middling type team. I don't know how him and Jack Eichel would get along.
Not at all.
But that could be an option. I don't think they would, yeah. But there are a few options there.
I would argue, though, about for John Tortorella, it's a lot of people point out.
Brandon, do you have any thoughts?
I think he's...
I think he's lagging a little bit. We're
okay, if you could hear me now, good.
Oh yeah, you're good.
Okay, I was gonna say The one thing I don't like about John Tortorella, though, is like the thing about him is one thing he's always mentioned. He's got the Stanley Cup. He's got the experience. What has he done in the past decade? And that's the thing. Look at him, and I don't know if he's the guy then that got to fix the team. I still think you got to look at other positions in the organization. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, your Tortorella's Stanley Cup was in 2004. That's a long time ago at this point. And yeah, he doesn't necessarily agree with star power, as we've seen with guys like Laine and then Dubois. But you know what? I really do like Gerard Gallant as well, because Vegas sort of scrapped him. You're right, Steven. They sort of gave him the boot as soon as Pete DeBoer became available out west and just said, hey, we got to hop on, a coach like Pete DeBoer, who's been to 2 Cup finals and can take us there. And Gallant has just been sitting idly by. And I think that would be a good guy for the Sabres. A lot of people are very high on him. But there's a lot of people who also said that this isn't a coaching problem. Like you said, it can go all the way up to ownership. I do like Gallant as a hire, though, so I would espouse that.
And so while we're on the topic of hires and people who could potentially be joining this organization in the coming months, Kevin Adams has come out in his press conference yesterday and said he's looking for an assistant general manager, which is very interesting. I mean, some people, this kind of makes it obvious. Ralph Krueger kind of was. I mean, we already knew he had a say in a lot of these decisions, especially with the Taylor Hall signing. What do you guys think about this? Do you think this is a good move? Who do you think are some potential candidates? I'll start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, the more help that he can get in there, Kevin Adams, as a rookie GM, the better. I really think that they need, an assistant GM would be a great start. Ideally, I would also like to see a president of hockey ops hired. The hierarchy here cannot be, Terry and Kim as the owner and Kim as the president, and then Kevin Adams and then the coaching staff. That just can't be the hierarchy. You need to have an intermediary. Look at what Pittsburgh just did, hiring very strong candidates for president of hockey ops and Burke, and then GM and Ron Hextall. You need some hockey people in there to be making the hockey calls, and I think assistant GM is a good place to start for sure.
And one of the names that's out there is Jason Carmanos. He's won 3 Stanley Cups as an assistant general manager with Carolina and Pittsburgh. The Sabres have gotten permission from the Penguins. He's still under contract with the Penguins to interview him. So this is someone who's obviously very experienced in this. Would be a great addition. I mean, 3 Stanley Cups, and you're coming in to help Kevin Adams. I think that would be huge. Do you have any other opinions of people who could be good options? I'll go to you, Steven.
The one name that has definitely been floated around specifically to get an NHL head GM job was Mike Fuda, the former LA Kings assistant general manager. He's someone who's really well respected, really good at scouting. That was a thing that he could really bring to the table. He was one of the reasons why they picked Drew Doughty in that draft when they got some other guys like Toffoli, Pearson, Simmons. So he brought in some really good value to that team. So that's a good experienced guy who's been assistant GM for most of his professional career, so he could play that role. The one other name is I would love to see if they would talk to Jim Rutherford, and I know that his tenure in Pittsburgh ended, but this is a guy who I don't think we're going to see as an NHL GM again, because I don't think he wants to be like the main guy. But if he's more the assistant or just even act as an advisor, I think that would be a guy who, like, we saw what he was able to do for a couple of years in Pittsburgh. Yeah, they had the talent, the top star power, but he still had to build the rest of the team around it, and I think he did a good job. So those are names I would look at for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we're talking about guys that could be coming into the organization. Well, here's a player that could be leaving. We're going to get to the bigger names later, but Sam Reinhardt's name is actually out there. Teams have inquired about him. Would you trade him if you were the Buffalo Sabres? And what is his value? I'm curious. Let's start with Brandon here.
Sam Reinhardt, he's an interesting one. I don't want to call him untouchable, but based on how Sabres players have produced this season, I would really hate to see him go. He's been one of the more consistent players, had a lengthy point streak there, which is saying a lot when you're talking about Sabres players this season. I would really like to see him be given the chance to succeed, namely on, the Skinner, Eichel, Reinhardt line. I would love to see that line reunited. So I wouldn't like to see that. Taylor Hall is an interesting name too, but we can get to that. Tom, you got anything to say about Reinhardt or, Hall in particular?
It's interesting because I think this team is they're going to make trades. I don't know why they haven't yet. There were times way before that you could have potentially saved this season and tried to move some pieces out. Reinhardt is a big name out there, and it would be interesting. I'd almost be happy for Reinhardt. I feel like he doesn't get enough love in Buffalo. I think he's a bit overshadowed here because he actually is a big producer for this team. He's leading the team in points, 19 points through 27 games. He is Buffalo's guy right now. So if you're going to get good trade value for him, I think now is probably a good time with Eichel out, and he's shown that he can be that guy in Buffalo. I mean, they're not winning, but he's the one that's getting all the points and racking it up. He's the star of the show right now. It would be a tough loss for the Sabres, but if they can get something valuable back, it might be worth it. I mean, Kevin Adams has said he's open to anything and everything in terms of trading. So I think it's something he's going to look at. What do you think, Steven?
I think that the team has enough trade options where they don't need to move him if they don't have to. I don't think, like, let's say in theory they do trade Jack Eichel, you're going to need someone to play forward. And having a guy like Reinhardt who could be, like, he's not old, but he could be kind of the mentor to a guy like Dylan Cousins, and for the young guys coming in, I think he'd be a really nice value guy to keep. And he's someone where I think if you trade him, you're going to be, like, in a year or two, you're already big time regretting it, saying, well, we didn't need to trade him, but we got some good stuff back. If you do trade Eichel, obviously you're going to get a great return, probably not full value because he is one of the better players in the league when he's at his full pace. Eric Stahl, I think, would bring in a nice value to a team in the playoff hunt. You trade him to a team that could use an extra center, could use that extra depth. I think you're going to get a good return out of it. AKA the Boston Bruins, I think, would be a great trade partner actually for them. Taylor Hall, I think obviously you almost kind of have to move him. I don't think he doesn't look happy. He doesn't look like he's having a fun time. At the same time, after a couple of rough years, you're going to start to wonder what is Eichel's true value at this point. We thought that maybe getting a chance to play with Eichel, play those big minutes, was supposed to be a big thing for him and the team, and it obviously hasn't worked out. But there's a very few pieces on this team that I think you really want to hold on to if you are going to blow this thing up any further. And I think you want to keep Reinhardt just because he's got the value, but I don't think you're going to get a fair enough value to the point where you got to trade him.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. All right. Once again, you are watching Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube. Follow and share on Facebook, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed. And once again, we are joined today by Stephen Ellis of the Hockey News. Like we mentioned earlier, guys, the Sabres just lost 4-1 in their first game with the new head coach, Don Granato, behind the bench, and the losing streak is extended to 13 games. Tom, kick us off with a little bit of discussion about tonight's game, and let's get to it.
Well, we're sitting here again talking about another loss. I think this is the third Sabres Scoop episode we've gone now without talking about a win. So it's obviously disappointing, especially these Sabres fans that are hanging on through this. I mean, I don't think anyone was really expecting this team to suddenly, Ralph Kruger's fired, they're going to come out firing on all cylinders, they're going to destroy the Boston Bruins. Like, no one was expecting that. But I really didn't see anything that different. I mean, the lines weren't that different. I mean, shots again, 37-24. They got killed in shots. This team, I don't know what it's going to take to turn them around. I don't know how long Don Granato is going to be behind the bench. I don't know if he just needs a few games. I mean, he had his first meeting with the team at 5 p.m. today, so 2 hours before the game. So he didn't really have much time to give a pep talk, but this is not looking good. And you look at their upcoming schedule, I honestly don't know when the streak is going to end. I mean, they're at 13 now. The all-time record is 18, held by the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it really wouldn't surprise me if they break that record. So another disappointing loss. Jordan, what do you make of this? 13 losses in a row. Is there anything you can take out of this?
Well, at least Don Granato put Jacob Bryson back in the lineup. He sure looks like an NHL player, and I'm glad we can at least talk positively about some of these players. Even Kyle Okposo scores his first career shorthanded goal. Probably a goal that shouldn't have gone in if you're Safalak, but at least some types of positives are coming from this game. But really, there weren't really that many. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Brandon?
Yeah, it was a lot of the same old stuff. They got scored on early, sorry, and kind of looked flat-footed a lot of the time. And Boston is a team that hasn't been too hot themselves. So I thought, yeah, they have a pretty good roster over there, but maybe, the Sabres could put up a good fight. David Krejci had 3 assists on the night. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It was a disappointing effort once again, but like you said, there were some positives. I think Hutton let in a few soft ones, but Jeff Skinner looked rejuvenated. I don't know if that has anything to do with the Ralph Kruger firing, but he got some good shots off. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and speaking
Even
of
I don't know
Skinner,
if you were watching tonight or if you've been watching any of the games lately. What do you think of this team? What do you think of their play? Do you see anything they could improve on? Is this just a lost cause? What are your thoughts?
I thought it was a solid enough first half, but the fact is the one goal was a shorthanded softie. That's not a really reliable way, I guess, of looking at it. But good for Okposo finally scoring this year. I know it's been a tough year. That's a team that just looks so flat right now. It looks like they're lifeless. Obviously, not having Eichel in the lineup definitely doesn't help. Hutton didn't play a great game. Like I said earlier, I'm not a fan of the team's goaltending situation overall, and tonight really didn't help that. So that kind of just looks like another game in this long streak right now, where it's like it's almost undistinguishable in a lot of cases. It just did not look like a full 60-minute effort. It was like first half was fine, and second half they just looked like they had nothing going for them. So it just kind of felt like a typical Sabres game over the last month.
It is unfortunate. And you mentioned goaltending. It's funny. I don't know, what was it, 2 weeks ago now, when Kevin Adams came out and held a press conference and someone asked about goaltending, and Ullmark's been out, and Kevin Adams said he's satisfied with the goaltending despite them both being sub 900 save percentages. So
I could play goalie in this team.
Yeah. It's interesting how they're valuing their goaltending, because I completely agree with you. One team I look at is the Arizona Coyotes. I've watched them quite a few times this season. I mean, Kemper and Ronta have been plagued by injuries the last few weeks here, but when you watch them, they steal games for that team. When you've got a deadly tandem in net, Ullmark was actually playing pretty well up to his injury, and I was saying they should have traded for that solid backup goaltender and have that 1-2 punch in net. Obviously, they haven't done that. They haven't made any trades this season, but I think it's definitely costing them some of these games.
Yeah, I think like the way I looked at the Sabres, it's kind of like, let's just kind of make way until Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen shows up. But even then, I haven't loved his performances this year. A couple of the games where it should have been more like a 4-1 or even a 4-0 game, and he allows 2 or 3 goals, and it's like, okay, yeah, in the end you're winning, but it's like it's not necessarily being totally impressive. But I like Ullmark. I like him as a backup. I think you need a guy who's the problem is, unless this year's market, unless you're getting a guy like Jacob Markstrom, there wasn't really a lot of options for a number one goalie. So I definitely am not a fan of the goaltending. It's been clear for a couple of years they needed something to kind of spice it up, and they haven't kind of found that. But I don't think Ullmark's a bad goalie, and like there's been a lot of performances this year where he's pointed that he's shown that clearly he's good enough. I don't like him as the starting goalie, and when your other option is not performing so hot, it's just a tough situation.
And we kind of mentioned trades there. We'll jump back in a little bit here and get a bit deeper here. On one of your recent podcasts, you were talking about how the value of Jack Eichel has changed this season. How do you think this has changed? Do you think his injury has a big effect on this? Do you see him potentially being moved anytime soon, ever? What do you think of his value right now?
For a while in like Winnipeg, for example, I said that Winnipeg was going to regret trading Patrick Laine, and I still believe that's true. But right now, like he's had a bit of a rough little go there in Columbus. The same goes for Eichel and Mars. So I think trading him, you lose such an important piece that you really should. You've had time to build around. You've had to found ways to get around. If you trade him, I don't think you're progressing anywhere in terms of getting closer to being a competitive team. Even though you're going to get a lot out of it, I don't know necessarily they're progressing when you're trading away a guy who it was definitely a true MVP threat all season long last year. I Matt Larkin said that he believes the trade value definitely has dropped a bit. I don't know if I totally agree on that. I still think teams know what he's capable of and what value he has. Like, you look at the situation he's in there. He wasn't like he was playing terrible. Yeah, he didn't score a lot, but he was still putting points on the board. He was really trying to carry a team that it's kind of hard to save a group that has been playing so poorly, and then the injury didn't help. So I would have loved to, like, if he goes to a different team, I think all of a sudden his where we're talking about a guy who's probably playing for a team that competes for a Stanley Cup, because he would make that big of a difference. He just couldn't do that with the core around him. So I still think it'd be a mistake. You still got to find ways to get to build around. But again, they've had over half a decade to figure this out and haven't.
Got any takes on that, Jordan?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, when you look at even what's out there, I mean, Quinton Byfield's obviously one of the better center prospects and would probably be the only one available. I know the New York Rangers are the team that's most likely going to be the team he would end up on. And I mean, Alexis Lafreniere obviously is spectacular, a first overall pick. But is he really going to be solving Buffalo's issue? Now Buffalo's going to have a first-line center issue for years to come, and they're going to have to try to address that. So it's all about what the fit is there, what they can find. You're obviously better if you keep Jack Eichel, but I don't think you're getting anywhere close to the value if you trade him.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree with that. Yeah, you're going to lose a trade where Jack Eichel is leaving your team. It doesn't matter who you get back. Even if you get some grade A prospects, even a guy like Byfield, is he going to end up? Because we've seen what Jack Eichel can do. He's been point per game in a full 82 game season. Will Byfield live up to that? Possibly, but we know Jack Eichel can do that, and with lesser teammates than he could have had. So, given the right line mates and the right core around him, Eichel could make any team into a cup contender, like Steven said, and I would hope that's the Sabres down the road. But I really hope that this doesn't end with him leaving. But it's a possibility. So,
I know we don't think it would be a good idea, but do you think this is a possible thing Kevin Adams is seriously considering doing? I mean, he said multiple times. He's taking calls. He's not the one. I don't think he's the one going out offering him, but he's taking all the calls on Jack Eichel. Do you think he would pull the trigger if he sees an offer that entices him?
I think teams got to be listening. That's for sure. Or he's got to be listening to all offers, because you might actually get an offer that's you can't say no to. If Eichel doesn't want to be there, at that point, it's not worth keeping him around. But if he's willing to be there and willing to be part of the team's future, you don't trade him. But if he doesn't want to be there, you try to get the most value. Obviously, LA, Rangers, those are two teams we've heard a lot about. Boston is one where I think could be a very strong fit, just because of his ties to the city and everything. And he grew up a Sabres or Bruins fan. But there's a couple places that would make sense. But again, it's like it would be so hard to get that value. And there's at the same time, could also, maybe we actually see teams actually would mortgage their future to bring in a guy like that, because getting a player who can be such a game changer, like Eichel hasn't hit the 100-point mark in his career, but he's had so many good seasons for a guy who's had not much to play with and a team that's never contending for a playoff spot. So the fact that he's been able to do that, what would he do on a team where he has some better wingers? Like give him like Johnny Gaudreau. Let's say send him to Calgary. How good do you think he'd be with a guy like Johnny Gaudreau or even Kachuk on us? I think all of a sudden we're talking about one of the top scorers in the league here in Eichel. But I think the Flames would be a team like, yeah, well, sure, let's overpay for it. But I just it's so hard to really justify it, and unless he really wants out. And I don't know if he really wants out at this point. Obviously, it's not a fun situation to be in, and like for a guy this young, watching all these other guys that are going out there and playing so much better and playing on better teams. Even Connor McDavid, yeah, he's played in the Oilers, but the Oilers look much better shape than the Sabres, obviously. And you look at that and it's like, well, I could be doing that too. I wouldn't blame him if he wants out, but I don't know. It's you got to listen to the offers, but I still don't think it's the right call, because you're not going to get a guy of his caliber back.
Well, on the topic of prospects, Steven, you know a lot about those. So let's talk about a hypothetical 2021 draft. I don't know if this will ever happen, knowing the history of this organization, but if the Sabres get the first overall pick, who are you taking and who's in your top three?
Oh, that's a tough one, because this year's draft is so like It's not amazing by any sense of the world. And the fact that it's a year where a lot of players haven't played a whole lot, that changes a lot. But going with that, 2022 draft is the one where if you suck and you come in the bottom 3 of the league, you're going to get not a generational player, but you'll get a franchise changing player. You did not get that this year, but at least you can go out there and stock up on a really strong defenseman. If they say they get number 1, I think the top choice is Owen Power. And if you put him beside Rasmus Dahlin, I think would kind of fill some of the gaps that maybe is missing is Dahlin's game. He's a really physical presence that you could really love watching. He's 6'4". I got an article coming up about him tomorrow with his skills coach, kind of explaining what makes him so good. Brent Clark is another guy that's kind of like what we will fully expect Rasmus Dahlin to do in his prime, where he would be. Well, maybe more of he's a Cale Makar light type guy. If you like Cale Makar, I think you'll like Brent Clark. Cale Makar is a pretty good player. Brent Clark is someone who had over 100 points in his minor midget season as a defenseman. He was setting up guys like Shane Wright and Brennan Auman. And if you know how to play with a guy like Shane Wright, you can gel with some top quality players. And you know what? Maybe that's the puck moving defenseman that Eichel needs passing to him type thing. If you want to go the forward route, that's where it gets a bit more challenging. I do like Matt Beniers. He's a guy that just an absolute workhorse at the University of Michigan. Strong playmaker, but he's putting up a lot of goals this year. He's having some really good line mates to play with. And when you get a guy who, as a freshman, is playing as well as he is, that's confidence heading into his eventual move to the NHL. I don't think there's a lot of guys this year in the draft that will go straight to the NHL next year, maybe less than usual. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're not going to get someone who's going to fix this team, but you're going to get an important piece that will set you up well for the future. But if you're the Sabres, I know you don't want to keep losing, but 2022 and 2023, I'm not kidding. Those drafts are front loaded. They're heavy skill. You're getting a guy who could be your number 1 player almost immediately. So that's going to be fun going to that point.
Yeah, well, we've seen the Sabres commit to a tank before to try to aim for that first overall pick, so maybe they'll decide to do it for next year. I hope not, but we'll see. Just before we wrap up here, we are reaching the end of this episode, but I'm curious to know, Steven, who is the biggest name that you see being traded at this year's trade deadline, which is fast approaching? We've seen names, Taylor Hall we mentioned earlier, even Philip Forsberg's name has been thrown out there. Who's the biggest player you see being traded? You can even throw out a couple if you'd like.
That's a very good question. Obviously, the Taylor Hall one, I still think it's not a done deal for his career. Obviously, he goes to Arizona and he plays on a team that can't score. Goes to Buffalo and plays for a team that can't score. Put him on a team that can score and let's see what happens. He had a little bit of that in New Jersey and it worked out well enough to get MVP. But I would say I think Forsberg is definitely another one for sure. Maybe, just maybe, we see a trade for Robin Leonard. That's one name that actually has been kind of mentioned a little bit. It's like obviously there's been some like health concerns there in terms of like, because he missed a long time of concussion, and there was the talk at the beginning of the season that he arrived to training camp at 300 pounds. But right now it's like it's, and I'm not even kidding on that. That's a real number that's been thrown around. But it's like you look at how Fleury's playing. Maybe get another year or 2 out of him and maybe see what you can get out of Robin Leonard. I don't think we'd see him, but that is a name that's been mentioned. And if he's not really on the market, whoa.
For sure.
Do you think there's going to be excitement at this trade deadline? I mean, a lot of people. Yeah.
No, because of how hard it is to trade players this year, like especially on the deadline day itself, like, yeah, you'll see some teams in the States trading for each other and a couple teams in Canada. But like, if you want to see an actual big trade and it has to involve a Canadian team and an American team, we're going to see it pretty early. You know what? The thing is this year, it's a lot of teams also, I think, kind of understand just the uniqueness of the year. And it's like, don't go and hurt your future that would help you in a full length season to help you in a shorter season. So I think some teams are being careful, but at the same time, look at a team like LA and you look at all the top prospects they got in that system. Even Ottawa, 2 teams that I think really could keep an eye on. So I think it'd be more fun not to watch which players are available. It's which teams are kind of looking the most. And look at the Montreal Canadiens, a team that could really, they still got a shot here after a little bit of a rough run. Maybe they go out and acquire someone big and see what they do. I thought Taylor Hall to Montreal would have actually made a lot of sense, and I still think that could make a lot of sense. And it just, again, what's the return like? Montreal's got a couple goalies in the system that could trade. Maybe Caden Primo and Taylor Hall are involved in a trade type thing, which Caden Primo all of a sudden gives you a bit of life in net. So, but I still don't think it's going to be a great trade deadline just because logistically it's going to be so much harder this year to do. And I just don't think we'll see anything huge.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, that's usually one of my favorite days, but obviously it's probably not going to be anything to look forward to this year. I mean, we'll probably see things start trickle in soon. So, and probably with the Sabres if they're going to play their cards right, in my opinion.
Just don't trade Eichel. Do not trade Eichel. I still don't think if you're trading him, you want to trade him to a team that's going to guarantee you a top 3 pick in the draft next year. And then maybe the Sabres suck and they get 2 picks in the top 3 and it works out amazingly. If you're not getting something like super high value, just keep him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see it happening, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll wrap things up here. So we thank you for joining us. This has been Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube and Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter at SabresScoopTHW. We'd also like to thank Stephen Ellis for joining us this time around, and you can follow him on Twitter at StephenEllisTHN. Don't miss out on all the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. From Jordan, Brandon, this is Tom, and this has been the Sabres Scoop. Until next time.